Happy Halloween from all of us at Moral Side of the News. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. Joining me as always, a distinguished panel this week, Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church in New Albany, Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition, and Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. I tried to order drive-through coffee the other day, but the sign posted said they were closed due to a shortage of employees. Perhaps you've seen the same. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says Kentucky has the highest quit rate in the nation. 84,000 Kentuckians quit their jobs in August, 26,000 more than quit in July. But Governor Andy Beshear insists there is reason for hope. He says more than 100,000 people were hired in August. Panel, what's being coined the Great Resignation has people quitting jobs for higher pay and critical support like childcare. So now to you, do you share the governor's hope?
I do absolutely. It for the first time gives workers options. That is what's so unique about this current so-called employment crisis. To quote an old Negro folk tale, the bottom rail is rising to the top. So now the bottom rail and the bottom workers are having greater options that they likely did not have before, and they're showing that in their ability to say no and take this job and not shove it, but we'll move someplace else. So they have options. They have someplace to go. It'd be different if where they had to go was an unemployment line, but that's not the case. They're actually going to another job. So really, that's a good situation to have. It's very unique. It's kind of a strange scenario here in Kentucky that we're at the top with this particular statistic. Oftentimes, we're almost always at the bottom of things good and at the top of things bad. But I think this is a kind of a good bad situation to be in with respect to the job opportunities are greater than the workers to fill those jobs. That's good for the workers. So I think it's a very unique and kind of a strangely blessed place to be for the workers in particular.
I think it becomes a microcosm, or Kentucky does, for what's going on nationwide as workers say, I have opportunity now. And it's like this undercurrent organic rising up of people saying, I have a choice. And after this horrible pandemic, I'm going to make life different for myself and my family, which is a very positive outcome, I think, from these trying last 18 plus months. What I find confusing is if there are so many unemployed and so many places open, how does that gap come together? Do you understand what I'm saying? People are moving up to better jobs, but there's still this huge number unemployed. Where are they? Are they finding what they need? And I remember my dad saying, don't go to the next job until you've got it. So I wonder some about that too, just to keep, because I am concerned about the finances and what I see people needing in my community. So those are some wonderings I have with all of the positive that's also coming out of it, of people voicing what they need in this organic shift.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, it's kind of building on both of what Clay and Harriett were saying. I think some of the articles that were out there don't give me, at least, enough information. It's almost, and it's impossible to get, but it's almost like you would want to have exit interviews with a lot of these people. When you first see the headline, and even, I guess, the Illusion song, take this job and shove it, I quit, means I'm going unemployed. But in fact, that seems to be not the case. Most everybody who seems to be quitting, at least the illusion seems to be, they're going to a better job. Well, that's a wonderful thing in life in general. But if it's a case they're feeling frustrated by their work conditions and then just getting out of the force again altogether, of the workforce. So while there may be large numbers of unemployed, I'm not sure that that's, again, directly linked to these people who are quitting their job and moving on. My congregation also operates a school. It's a very large, at least among Catholic parishes, schools. So I've got a pretty significant payroll. And I think right now we've got about 70 to 80 employees, if you count both school and the congregation. We've had some turnover, and almost always it's been either retirement or it's been somebody who's got a job that we simply either can't offer them because it's not even on our staff, or it's a wonderful opportunity for them and their family. And so that's one of the questions I would have. Like, for instance, these quitters, some of them also retiring. So again, that's, a lot of people have taken retirement, I think, because it related to COVID. And the stresses that come with that, they might have retired a little bit earlier than they might have ordinarily. And so for the fact that there are so many wonderful opportunities out there, that's a plus for almost all workers. And if the ones that are still open, places trying to struggle, then certainly it is going to be harder and harder, I think, for a lot of those businesses to maintain maybe their particular, business plan, because, again, we also demand low prices, and low prices are usually generated by low wages. And that's a direct link there. If we increase wages, you can expect prices to also go up. So it is a lot of complicating things that we don't think we have all the information, but I'm certainly excited about the fact that people have so many more opportunities than they would have 2-3 years ago.
I'm wondering, in talking about the lack of information, is this helping women and people of color get better jobs and higher paying jobs and closing the gap? And a year from now, or 6 months from now, I'd like somebody to say, it really did, because this is how the gap has been closed, or it's coming to a better equalization. And in those situations, are women and people of color getting paid what others are being paid in those positions, even though they might be entering? Are they being treated with equity and fairness?
Well, at the very least, Harriet, the employers are competing for that segment you just mentioned. Okay. Far too long, those individuals, women and people of color and Black people as in particular have been at the very bottom. So now you're having employers competing for those that segment in the labor market. So that's a good thing. So in terms of getting paid, whether it's in actual wages, whether it's an increase in benefits, whether it's an increase in flexibility and employment conditions, all of those things are being considered now in a way they probably were not before, because they're competing with other markets to get this labor, limited labor. So it's just a good thing that those at the bottom are getting a unique and special consideration they probably have never gotten in the history of this country. Of course, you mentioned people of color, slaves in particular. That this slavery was a pivotal labor movement reality in this nation that was an example of extreme inequity. You can go back to the story in the Bible of the Jews in Egypt. That was a labor movement when they left. So we have in our biblical tradition a tremendous labor issue that is right there in the second book of the Bible. And the reason that Pharaoh was so upset when he finally agreed against his desires, he was forced to give them their freedom and resources. He regretted it and went after them because of the labor advantage he lost. So that was a whole labor issue that is right there in the book of Exodus. That's for most of us who use the Bible as their frame of moral reference. So I think you're seeing something like this now. It's a major gear shift. I think in the morality of the labor market, because we still see executives at the very top, the Bezos of the world, you got Tesla, all these corporate executives who make extreme amounts of money. So the gap has gotten much wider, even though you're seeing some movement at the bottom, but the movement at the top has gotten astronomical in this recent era, particularly during this age of COVID. So I'm just glad to see some movement, some moment of equity being implemented by circumstances. Most of it, I think, has been implemented through the COVID, et cetera. But I'm encouraged to see some moment of equity being being manifested in our midst for those that have historically been at the very bottom.
Even building on that, I think it's sometimes a bit of an irony that capitalism, one of the things that we extol as a brilliant, wonderful, effective way of running business. Now, the fact is, it's almost like working in reverse against it right now. And capitalism is based on the theory you sell as low as you can, and you hire as low as you can, and you try to keep your profits maximized. And what's happening now is profits are going to start minimizing if you're going to try to still keep your market share, but increase your labor cost. And the labor cost is going to spread across every aspect of our country because of the whole distribution processes and all the things that we're hearing about, the shortages that are happening in other ways in our communities because of, again, some of these same principles operating. I can do better somewhere else now, and I don't have to put up with this. And so for people to maintain their same level, it's going to cost them more. And hopefully it does benefit those at the lower level as well.
I hope it also translates into how those workers are treated
Right.
as they move into another workplace, that it's not jumping from, the skillet into the fire, but it is, they go into a new work environment, and that work environment realizes, oh, we need to treat our employees with some dignity and equity and fair policies and all of that. And that it is not, that we're not growing morally or ethically or even to be the best human beings we can be as we navigate this new landscape of employment and employees.
Well, we're off to a good start on this edition of Moral Side of the News. Thank you, panel. As the world reaches the 2-year mark of the COVID-19 pandemic, supply chain shortages affect all of us. Panel, here's the latest that's on the list: coffee, chicken, frozen meals, diapers. So my question to you is, are you stocking up, and are you surprised by all this?
Well, the question for me, I'm not stocking up. I don't think we've made a rash on toilet paper like we did early in the pandemic. So many of those products that were in extreme shortage then, ironically enough, are not in short supply now. You still get Lysol, you can still get, sanitary wipes. So the pandemic made us aware of certain products that we probably took for granted. And I don't see that rash taking place just yet. I noticed about a month ago, I get cold brewed coffee. Now, some of you may not drink cold brewed coffee, but so my spot, I went and got cold brew in a can, and I get them in the boxes. Okay, they say they had them there for months, and they said because of supply chain. Now, I went back about 2 weeks ago, they had big racks and racks of them. But again, just like an item that I would take for granted, it suddenly disappeared because of the supply chain shortage. And that was happened to be, I'm gonna give a brand name, it happened to be at Costco, but they never had that shortage before, but they had it now. So it's just a random mix of products that we may not be able to identify till you go looking for it. And then I'm in the process of rebuilding my house. So I'm realizing that there's a shortage in products. I got to get windows. Windows used to be able to get maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Now it's taking 2 and 3 months. So you got long lead time on manufacturing because you have people that are not working at the plants that manufacture. So you bump into it when you least expect it, only when you have to go somewhere and make a purchase. So it's just popping up everywhere. And it is, and I'm noticing that when I went to order some furniture, look at some furniture, they said, well, it won't be here because it takes 4 months because it's coming from Vietnam. And the COVID has affected plants there, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just amazing to see how this COVID has had a ripple effect with the overall economy and the global economy with the supply chain.
We find ourselves, this happened before. You alluded to, it's not the first time we've had this, and it goes back all the way to the war years, back in World War II when things were rationed, but it can bring out the best, and it does, again, bring out sometimes the worst in human nature. The The fact is that it invites all of us to sacrifice, for the good of all, sometimes, and be willing to do without something or delay something for a short term. But it can also lead to hoarding, which is, I think, in the human nature at sometimes its worst. I actually went looking, since it wasn't on the list, but I went looking for some saltine crackers. I enjoy those particular kind of crackers, and there was none on the shelf. And anywhere, and no brands. I mean, it wasn't just like the brand I was looking for, but there were no brands of it. I said, okay, well, I just won't have crackers now for a while. I didn't feel like it was a crisis. I didn't go now running to another store, to another store, to another store, to another store, to another store. It's okay, well, so I'll do without, and if somebody else needs those, happy for them. But it's like, again, you alluded to like a cold brew, you do without it for a while, you make the sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And there is a nice tradition of sometimes making sacrifices and offering it up
right,
for the good of others. And so it's an invitation for us to do that as well. And sorry, Harriet, we both started at the same time.
No, that I appreciated your comments, because it ties in with my thought about we're finding out what our needs and our desires are. Mm-hmm. And on the list is diapers. And so as pastor, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, maybe the congregation needs to buy diapers when we're out so that we can provide for families who might run into that shortage. So it becomes, again, that we can sacrifice. I think I can sacrifice coffee. I'll let you know.
Right.
But, a mama and a papa or a grandparent or whomever is taking care of a little one, they can't sacrifice diapers, right? So how do we as the community see the shortages and respond with a community thought? How do we help one another?
And you mentioned
simply, again, get more creative as well. Mm-hmm. Disposable diapers is a very, very new invention in the line of history.
Yes,
it is. It is.
Look over history. So sometimes it does mean having to get recreative again as a way to find alternatives. That's one example. I mean, across the board, it just calls for us to, again, use the resources we have available to us to the best of our abilities, and then do without. Because again, remembering there's so many people, billions of people around the world, who don't have access to stuff we take for granted.
Right, really first world problem, isn't it? That I can't get Ben and Jerry's fish sticks and coffee.
Yeah.
Puts it in a different perspective.
Right. Harry, you mentioned a key word that I was zeroing in on, and that was the word community. I think it's creating an appreciation for community in ways we probably never thought about before. Common hardship, common crisis has a way of creating community.
Yes.
You go back to 911, for example. This country was no more united at that moment of crisis. So crisis and variations of crisis have a way of creating community in a way that very few other things can. So I think if it's working within your congregation to think more like a community, how can we meet the need of the community? It makes you think those ways that you probably never considered before. So I think it creates a climate for community to be explored and to be pursued in a way that otherwise would not be, because of the shortage of things. But you still have, even though you have a shortage of things, you still have a pretty high supply of community that you can draw from and benefit from. So I think ultimately it's going to bless us. And I think the principles of our faith can come to bear and manifest themselves in this time of crisis.
Well, I pray that sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just have another benefit too. Just think right now the stories we'll be telling 20 years from now. Mm-hmm. Telling our children, our grandchildren, mm-hmm. This is what it was like. Because I grew up with all those stories from my parents of the war years. During the Second World War, I grew up with all those stories of the Great Depression. And that's all part of community. So, passing stories. That's how our faith is where it is today. Because, a small group of people got together, remembered, and started telling stories about Jesus or about Moses or about Aaron or Abraham, we began telling stories, and that's another benefit. So make sure you keep straight the stories. Of course, you don't want to let the facts get in the way of a really good story.
Right.
Well, one thing that has benefited us, you mentioned that, Bill, the pandemic of 1918, okay, stories about that have come alive again. They've gotten a second life during this pandemic, when everyone was forced to wear a mask back then. You didn't have the technology you had then, but you did have a mask. So those stories of that time in our history has come alive and been of great benefit, and helped us to know that if they made it then under those circumstances, then surely we can make it now when we have far more other resources at our disposal in a way that they did not have then. So those stories can actually have salvation, like the Bible says that they were saved by their testimony. So those are the testimony. When they had a test, then they were able to provide a testimony that can also save others. So you see that cycle happening now, and we have faith. I'm encouraged overall. I'm hopeful, and I'm encouraged to see how this faith that we live by day shows itself to be strong and sustaining in ways that we probably just took for granted before.
I am encouraged, but I hope that our memory is long, and that which we are learning about being in community and what we're willing to give up as we ferret out our desires from our needs, and as we see what one another really need to be the best they can be.
You're right.
Very good. This is moving right along. We're about 6 minutes left, and I want to hit on our third topic today. Let's talk about the good news movement. 2 different groups and 2 communities stepping up. One is at a high school in Shreveport, Louisiana. They made themselves T-shirts that say "Dad's on duty," and they take shifts greeting students in the morning and helping maintain a positive environment for learning. There had been a lot of fights before Dads on Duty volunteered. Now, not a single one. Meantime, it's Grandparents on Demand in Greensburg, Indiana. Free babysitting service for months, including a guarantee to have a fill-in grandma or grandpa on Grandparents' Day at school. All of this to help workers who move to town far away from their family. So, panel, wouldn't it be great to see a groundswell of movements like this every day?
Well, absolutely. I think the Dad's on Duty, I like it. Has a nice little poetic ring to it. So something about having a presence of a dad there. Chris Rock famously said he'd much rather run to a police than his dad. His dad's presence and his mother's threat is, "I'm gonna tell your dad," had a way of really arresting him. So dads have a way of, and their presence is invaluable. And James Brown had a song called "Papa Don't Take No Mess." I think that same principle applies here with Dad's on Duty.
I liked in that story the student who said the dads have a stare or a look, and that can squelch any shenanigans in the hallways. And isn't it amazing the power of presence?
There you go. There you go.
They didn't go in trained. They didn't go through 17 weeks of understanding the psychology of teenagers or students. They just went in being who they are. Mm-hmm. And wow,
yeah, that's it.
If dads can do that, can't we do that? Just show up with who we are,
right?
Make a difference.
I like that.
That's exciting.
If you see a need, you can certainly talk about it with some of your friends, but it's always taking it to the next step. And that's what these dads did. They took it to the next step. They saw the need and they took it to the next step. And while these are both the ones mentioned, the grandparents possibly up in that Indiana town and this down in Shreveport with the dads on duty, but not to also, again, forget our next door neighbors, literally. I do know in a lot of neighborhoods that there are adopted grandchildren and adopted grandparents, adopted just because, they're playing next door in the yard and they always wave and talk to each other. And, an example like Valentine's Day, to make Valentine's just somebody's not your family, but somebody you care deeply about, or whenever those kind of things come along, to hand make, some Christmas cards, and deliver them around the neighborhood, because there are people right next door to our homes or next door in our apartment or next door, wherever it is that we're living, who may be lonely. And if you don't pay attention to that, then that's even more sad. There's no reason for somebody to be lonely ever. If, so defined that way, there's no way that kids should grow up without somebody, being able to be there to welcome them each morning to school and put a positive smile on them, or tease them, or joke with them, or whatever it is to set a better tone. So that's, I think, a community responsibility we all share again. We all share.
And the grandparents stepping up to the plate in Greensburg. Think of this rural community and elders who may feel like that they've done their time, but they still have something else to give. Again, it's showing up, just being who they are with grandparent wisdom and the look that they've practiced for a long time, right? That's fabulous. And it's exciting.
And it's a simple effort.
Yes.
You mentioned you don't need special skills. Your presence is the present, and just your eyes and your heart and your mind there makes a difference. So it's a kind of a presence of salt, kind of presence of light. I mean, all those principles we talk about in the church, you can bring to bear on something simple like that. And we may not all do the same thing, but we can do something. So I think I love the idea of the dads and the grandparents.
And it does sometimes kind of happen instinctively. Some people in the neighborhood, they'll notice the grass is getting awful hot, or there's a whole lot of leaves in this person's yard. So, pitch in, check and see, check up on, and something like that. That's basically what these dads are checking up on these kids. Well, kids can also check up on dads, check up on granddads, and do all that together. So, don't miss those opportunities, to adopt, somebody. Now we all talk about adopting pets but let's also stop adopting human beings too.
Well, this is a faith. Our faith is a faith of adoption. The Christian faith is a faith of adoption.
Yes.
So who can practice it better than people of faith?
Right. And sometimes the person we're sitting next to in the pew or in service needs our adoption as well. In a different way.
Thank you, Harriett Akins-Banman. You have the final word on this edition of Moral Side of the News. Thank you to you, Reverend Clay Calloway and Father Bill Hammer. New this year, if you'd like to catch this program again, just go to YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. Until next week, we'll be back with a brand new edition of this program. Thank you, panel, and so long for now. It's never too early to consider a tax-deductible year-end donation to the WHAS Crusade for Children. Just go to WHAScrusade.org, WHAScrusade.org to donate securely online. You can also mail your donation to WHAS Crusade for Children, 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. That's WHAS Crusade for Children, 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202.